Spain did not directly lose territory during the Mexican-American War 1846-1848. Instead, that war was fought between Mexico and the United States. However, the roots of Spain's loss of vast territory in the Americas, including areas that later became part of the US, go back to earlier events. Here's a breakdown of the historical context. 1. Spain's colonial empire in the Americas. In the 16th to early 19th centuries, Spain controlled a massive empire in the Americas, including all of modern Mexico, much of the southwestern United States, Central America, and large parts of South America. The northern provinces of New Spain, such as California, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, were sparsely populated and difficult to manage. 2. Mexico gains independence from Spain. 1821. After more than a decade of rebellion, Mexico won independence from Spain in 1821. With independence, Mexico inherited all of Spain's northern territories, including what is now the U.S. Southwest. Spain no longer controlled the region. This marked Spain's loss of control over vast areas in North America. 3. Mexican-American War 1846-1848. After independence, Mexico struggled to control its northern lands and faced pressure from U.S. settlers, particularly in Texas. In 1836, Texas declared independence from Mexico, with many Anglo-American settlers leading the movement. It was annexed by the U.S. in 1845. The annexation of Texas and disputes over the border led to the Mexican-American War. The war ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, 1848. Mexico ceded over half its territory to the U.S., California, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming. This land had once been Spanish territory, but by then it was Mexican. Summary: Spain lost the territory through Mexican independence in 1821. Mexico lost the territory to the U.S. in 1848 during the Mexican-American War. So, while Spain didn't lose land directly to the U.S. during the war, it indirectly contributed to the situation by losing Mexico, which inherited and then lost that land to the U.S. 4. Aftermath and consequences for Spain. Although Spain was not a direct participant in the Mexican-American War, it experienced long-term effects from the territorial shifts, a permanent decline of the Spanish Empire. By the early 1800s, Spain had already lost most of its American colonies after losing Mexico. In 1821, Spain's empire in the New World shrank dramatically. The only significant colonies Spain still held by the mid-19th century were Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. B. Rise of the United States. The Mexican Cession of 1848 gave the U.S. control of key areas like California, leading to the California Gold Rush. 1849. The expansion of U.S. economic power and settlement westward. The U.S. began to emerge as a continental power, filling the vacuum left by Spain and later Mexico. C. Spain's final colonial losses. 1898. In the Spanish-American War, 1898, Spain lost its last major colonies to the U.S. Cuba became independent under U.S. influence. Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines ceded to the U.S. This marked the definitive end of the Spanish Empire and confirmed the U.S. as the dominant power in the Western Hemisphere. 5. Territorial evolution summary. Here's how control of the land changed. 6. Cultural and historical legacy. Even though Spain lost these lands long ago, its legacy remains. Spanish language and culture continue to influence the American Southwest. Place names like Los Angeles, San Antonio, Santa Fe, etc. are reminders of Spanish rule. Land grant issues. mission architecture, and Hispanic heritage continued to shape regional identity. 7. The strategic importance of Spain's former territories even after Spain lost control. The regions it once governed continued to hold immense value. Economic impact: California became an economic powerhouse, thanks to the gold rush and later agriculture. Oil and technology. The Southwest U.S., Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, developed significant ranching, mining, and trade industries. The U.S. acquired Pacific access through California, opening new trade routes with Asia. B. Military and political. Power control of western lands gave the U.S. strategic military depth. U.S. forts, railroads, and settlements helped it consolidate control over indigenous lands, another complex. Tragic legacy. The U.S. Navy's reach expanded after acquiring ports like San Diego and San Francisco. 8. Mexican instability and Spain's interest. Though Spain had formally relinquished claims, it continued to monitor Mexican politics. Spain refused to recognize Mexico's independence until 1836, hoping for possible restoration. During France's invasion of Mexico in the 1860s, Spain briefly joined in a coalition to intervene, hoping to regain influence but failed. Spain never regained any territory, but this shows how European powers continued to seek footholds in former colonies, especially as the U.S. grew stronger. 9. U.S. expansionism and the idea of manifest destiny. U.S. annexation of Spain's former lands via the war with Mexico was part of the ideology of manifest destiny, the belief that the U.S. was destined to expand from coast to coast. This idea justified the taking of territories that had once belonged to Spain. It reshaped North America's political, demographic, and linguistic map. 10. Conclusion: Spain's indirect but major role in North American history, though not a belligerent in the Mexican-American War, Spain laid the foundation. It colonized and named the lands. It introduced Catholic missions, legal systems, and Spanish culture. It indirectly set up the border conflicts that would later erupt between Mexico and the U.S. Spain's departure from North America wasn't the end of its influence, it simply shifted into cultural and historical legacy, felt even today. 11. Legal and cultural legacy of Spanish Rulia. Spanish legal traditions. Many U.S. states that were once Spanish colonies, like California, Texas, New Mexico, integrated aspects of Spanish and Mexican law into their legal codes. Community property laws, marital property division, trace back to Spanish law. Land grant claims from Spanish and Mexican eras had to be legally resolved in U.S. courts after annexation. B. Mission system and architecture. Spanish missions established in California, like San Juan Capistrano and San Diego de Alcala, became centers of religious conversion, especially of indigenous peoples, agriculture, trade, and colonization. These missions evolved into cities and still shape urban layout and architecture today. 12. Lasting demographic and linguistic influence. Hispanic identity. The Spanish colonization laid the foundation for a vibrant Hispanic Latino culture in the U.S. Millions of people in the U.S. Southwest identify as Mexican American or of Spanish descent. Spanish remains a widely spoken language, often second only to English in many areas. B. Indigenous displacement. Under Spanish, Mexican, and then U.S. control, indigenous groups suffered land loss, forced assimilation, and violence. Spain initiated the system of missions and encomiendas, while the U.S. expanded it through military removal and settlement. 13. Legacy in modern U.S.-Mexico relations. The U.S.-Mexico border today cuts through land that was once unified under Spanish rule. This history still affects modern issues. Border tensions stem from centuries of shifting control. Migration patterns, especially from northern Mexico into Texas, California, and Arizona, reflect old colonial trade and population routes. Cultural, festivals, food, language, and traditions in these areas are deeply rooted in Spanish and Mexican heritage. 14. Final thoughts. Spain's lasting shadow in North America. Though Spain lost its North American territories by the early 19th century, its influence never truly ended. The shapes of states, names of cities, and patterns of settlement bear Spanish marks. Its departure enabled the rise of Mexico and, ultimately, the U.S. as the dominant power on the continent. The story of how Spain's former empire fractured and was reshaped by newer nations is key to understanding the modern American Southwest.